We're ranking all of the position groups in the AFC East today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who make Locked On NFL Scouting your first listen every day, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much.
Joe, I have a trivia question for you to start off today's show.
Okay.
Can you recite in order the seeding of the AFC playoffs from the 2023-2024 NFL season?
I can. The 1 seed was the Baltimore Ravens. The 2 seed was the Buffalo Bills. The 3 seed was the Kansas City Chiefs. The 4 seed was the Houston Texans. The 5 seed was the
They played in Houston.
Yeah, it was the 5 seed. The 5 seed. Who
won
was
12
this?
games with 5 different quarterbacks.
Oh, it was the Browns. It was the Browns. The 6 was the Dolphins. The 7 was the Steelers. I know the Chiefs are unaware of this.
Yeah, so you can imagine my surprise
Yeah.
when I'm scrolling my timeline and Chiefs have their rings commemorating the most challenging road ever to
And they
winning
didn't
a Super Bowl.
even give themselves all the credit.
Didn't give themselves it was even harder than they gave themselves credit for in the inscription on the inside of their Super Bowl rings because they had the Dolphins listed as the 7 seed.
What do you do? What do you do there? You're not reprinting. I mean, how many rings these guys make?
This is Super Bowl rings.
Probably 100 rings or so, right? At least 150 rings. They're not cheap.
Yeah, what do you think the cost is of a Super Bowl ring?
What was it, like 500 diamonds on it? Like I don't know.
You think you want to get the little things right there,
dude. Yeah, it's not like typo in a text, or.
So if you missed it, they did like the brand kit release of all the images of all the close-up things that are super cool with the Chiefs Super Bowl rings that nobody else is going to get to know anything about because the Chiefs are just going to win every Super Bowl until Patrick Mahomes retires. And they have on the inside, underneath the face of the ring, is like each round because they're like, they beat 2 1 seeds and a 2 seed. It's the most challenging path any team's ever taken to win the Super Bowl. And their wild card round, they had a 7 next to Miami with the score, indicating that the Dolphins would be the 7 seed, and they weren't. They were the 6 seed. So.
If there was anything that could take the Utah Hockey Club out of the BS segment of Locked On NFL Scouting, it was a typo on the Super Bowl rings. So
that's what they settled on.
Yeah, it's not the Yeti, it's the Utah Hockey Club. It was right there. Yetis was right there.
I'll give them 3 years. They'll rebrand. Nobody's gonna go watch the Utah Hockey Club play.
No, yeah.
Nobody's gonna do it.
Yeah.
All right. So the BS segment had to do with the AFC East, considering the 2 teams that are on the Super Bowl ring.
We're glad we can be part of it.
Yeah, I'm glad to be around a Super Bowl ring, I guess. We are stacking in the AFC East because we've done the teams the past 4 days. We are stacking each position group that we bucket into tiers and listing them 1 through 4. So please bear in mind, there's more context and the roster scoring is much more nuanced than this. Okay. It's positional weights that are included. We're putting a bunch of stuff together. We have all skill players together. So if you've got really good wide receivers, but the rest of your things we have questions on, like the Cincinnati Bengals did, Bengals fans were real ticked off at us because they're like, oh, he should have been the number 1. We got T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. It's like, yeah. And you got Chase Brown at running back and Mike Gesicki at tight end, who's probably not even going to be your starting tight end, and your third wide receiver, who the heck knows? Right? So Jets fans, pocket that away for the end of the show. We'll give you the disclaimer right now. It's not just corners.
Dude, there's every fan base is going to be pissed off for some reason or another here. We know it, and we feel it, right?
Right. We know it.
And
And I think here's the thing that you and I struggle with is we like having like the in-depth conversation, really getting into the weeds with this stuff. So just ranking stuff,
yeah,
which everybody loves to do because it's hot button, like flashy content that everybody gets angry about and generates a bunch of engagement. Like we don't want to clickbait it. We want to be a part of the conversation with us, which is why we doing it like this. But
so don't screenshot.
Don't do it.
Don't screenshot and post it on social.
If you want to screenshot today's episode, right now is the time to do it. We'll give you a 5-second pause, like the old Edge and Christian 5-second pose from pro wrestling in the 90s. And we're going to wait 5 seconds. I'll shut up. Hope you got your screenshots. Joe, let's get rolling. We're doing quarterbacks first here in the AFC East.
Josh Allen, the Bills won.
Correct. That is the correct answer to lead things up. I think the compelling thing here is 2 and 3.
Yeah.
I know you and I'm inclined to feel particularly some kind of way about the stacking of 2 and 3. I know there's a compelling argument, and there is a world in which the Jets do have the second best quarterback situation in the AFC East. But based off of all of the information that we have right now, I don't think we realistically can say that that's where we're at.
Yeah, I think we got to put Tua and the Dolphins at 2. And the reason why is because, well, I don't know, did anybody have a better season? I mean, Aaron Rodgers didn't play last year. And Tua Tagovailoa, what did he lead the league in passing, lead the league in passer rating?
Passer rating was 2022.
Well, and so there's 2022 was better than Rodgers 2022. You can have all kinds of weird conversations about this, but right now I don't know how you don't look at Tua as the better option.
And this is not segmenting away from the entire situation, right? I think if you were starting from scratch, what's the order you would have the players? Aaron's not going to rank particularly high either because he's 41 years old, right? But at least that changes the dynamic of the conversation that you have with Tua versus he is playing in Miami. He does have the cast that he has around him. And when you put all that together, we stack it in front of what we know right now about the Jets. And we know even less about the Patriots.
Yeah.
Although if Jacoby Brissett does start the season, you have a nice high floor starter, but I don't know that you're doing backflips about that.
No. Okay, let's get to skill. Offensive skill. All of them, wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs.
All combined in one. It's the skill player supporting cast around your quarterbacks. We have the Dolphins sitting at number 1.
That's not really close, right? Like
Jaylen Waddle.
Keep going.
Raheem Mostert.
Keep going.
Devon Achane.
Keep going.
Odell Beckham Jr.
Keep going.
Jonnu Smith.
Keep going.
It's a good group.
Yeah, it's too much.
It's a good group.
Then it gets interesting after that. And Kyle and I debated this a lot. Who's 2
Heavily.
and who's 2 and 3. We have the Jets at 2, just barely edging out the Buffalo Bills. And the reason for this is really the Jets have a franchise cornerstone player in Garrett Wilson to go with Breece Hall, to go with Mike Williams. And we don't factor in injuries in these scores. And so that's going to show up a lot throughout this. I know you can say, well, Mike Williams is always injured. Yeah, but when he's available, he's a good player.
And on a week-by-week basis, when Mike Williams doesn't play,
right,
how we pick the games based off the rankings will reflect that.
Yeah.
But right now, we are operating under the assumption that Mike Williams is available because right now he's available.
I think the Bills are a lot deeper than the Jets, but the top end, I think you got to give it to the Jets, and that's what's going to put them over the Bills in this scoring.
Because there's only so many positions that there's only so many numbers at each position that gets scored, right? So having a better third and fourth option only moves the needle so much versus Garrett Wilson being the only cornerstone between the two teams. It's a big point differential.
Yeah.
And Breece Hall being a quality starter, that measures favorably versus what Buffalo has at wide receiver. And one of Buffalo's best assets is a young player in Dalton Kincaid, who have a 17-game season that looks like what the back half of last year looked like. And you're going to get a better score next year when we do this again.
Yeah. Or even when we kind of update it regularly throughout the season,
we do it quarterly.
Yeah.
We do the updates. And then the Patriots check in fourth. Joe, you want to talk about them real quick, or do you want to after the break, or
we can get to it real quick. I mean, it's Ramondre Stevenson and what? I mean, Hunter Henry's a solid tight end. Wide receivers is very much just a mix of unknown players, a lot of youth, which is exciting for them with Jalen Polk and Javon Baker and Pop Douglas and Tyquan Thornton, but not enough that we know about the receivers. Again, pretty good tight end, pretty good running back, but that's not going to put you ahead of any of the other teams in the division.
That's right.
All right, we're going to get to the trenches, O-line and D-line coming up on the other side of it, so be sure to stick with us. Passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
So we're going to the offensive line next.
Yep.
I just filtered our sheet so that you and I can speak correctly on how they are stacked. So let's start with the best offensive line in the AFC East, which belongs, according to us, the Buffalo Bills. And they have a cornerstone player in Deion Dawkins. They made some changes, right? In transition away from Mitch Morse at center. But they had a really deep unit last year that they didn't need to be deep because their five guys played, right? But I think with the transition away from Mitch Morse and the kind of the reshuffling of the deck there, their depth still allows them to score favorably with the guys that are stepping into new roles on the team. And, a young player in Osiris Torrance, who we expect is going to get better. He played the whole season. That development is going to be really helpful. But between David Edwards, who, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't start last year,
right?
But was like the de facto jumbo tight end.
Yeah,
for
them.
Snaps.
Yeah.
Connor McGovern, adequate level starter. Him transitioning and has had log snaps before at center in his career. It's just a really consistent group that's headlined by a cornerstone player in Deion Dawkins, who is probably one of the more underrated offensive linemen in football. Is that a fair statement?
I think people are learning. I think it's 4 consecutive Pro Bowl seasons, and I thought he had his best year yet last year. And the Bills run this like tackle wrap play where they just pull him all the time, and he was like the catalyst for the run game. And obviously, he's good in pass protection. But yeah, he's paid now. I mean, he's paid as a top 5 offensive tackle in the NFL. So if you don't know about Deion Dawkins, find out. And Spencer Brown, I think, is the right tackle. Elevating his performance last year was a big piece of the Bills' offensive line rounding into shape. So at number 2, and it was pretty close, we have the Jets at number 2. And they did a good job this offseason of really elevating the floor of this group, bringing in Tyron Smith, bringing in Morgan Moses, bringing in John Simpson, who good God, that's an upgrade over what they had in all 3 of those spots last year. Not to mention a developing young center and Joe Tippmann, who, for him to play as well as he did as a rookie with the environment that the Jets had, it really speaks to kind of the ceiling, I think, of what Joe Tippmann could be. And then, of course, Elijah Vera Tucker at right guard. When that guy's healthy, he's really, really good. The problem is the last 2 years he's not been healthy. But again, we're not accounting for injuries. And if they can have 17 games of Elijah Vera Tucker with this group, and I guess you can apply the same thing to like Tyron Smith, a guy that has had injury issues. If those guys can be healthy and play to their standard, the Jets are going to have a really good group in front of Aaron Rodgers.
So dividing the other 2 teams, you have the Dolphins and then the Patriots. And the Dolphins, they have a reasonably high floor across the board. Teron Armstead, their best player. But for the same things that you're talking about, Joe, with Elijah Vera Tucker and Tyron Smith, like it's applicable to Teron Armstead, who's Miami's best player. They got a nice jump from Austin Jackson last year, really elevated his play at the right tackle position. And Isaiah Wynn for the 5 games and 3 snaps that he played at left guard looked good. But problem was and is he's pretty persistently struggling with availability. But at the time being, that's an adequate level starter at left guard. You compare and contrast that to the Patriots, where you have a declining player in David Edwards, just a late stage player. Onwenu's their best player. He's graded in the same bucket as Teron Armstead is. They're projected to have either Chukwuma Okorafor or a rookie left tackle. That kind of dings them in the scoring process as well. And depth. Where you and I had the conversation about Miami, it's like, yeah, maybe you'd like O linemen 4 and 5 to be better. But if you look at the full breadth of like their 9 guys, you feel they're all rosterable guys. And New England, I don't think, has as much depth in that unit either.
So on offense, that's the Patriots dead last at all 3 spots.
Well, it checks out because we had eyes and we know what the last 2 years have looked like, right? And unfortunately, when you restart to the degree that they had to and have to build foundationally, you have the youth. Now it's just seeing what guys hit and what way they develop, how quickly they develop. And I think this can get shaken up for them for the better this upcoming season. But at least they have a direction. But they just don't have the identity and the development because of how directionless they've been offensively under the last couple of years of Bill.
Defensive line time?
Defensive line time. Go ahead, Joe, because I can't say it.
Well, we have the number 1 defensive line in the division as the Miami Dolphins. Again, keeping in mind, this is not factoring injury, so they're getting all the points for Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb. And I thought they did a good job of kind of hedging those guys anyways with Shaq Barrett. And, they're not getting any points for Chop Robinson as a rookie. But, I mean, if Shaq Barrett's your 3rd rusher, that's really strong. But they still have Zach Sealer, which I think is kind of a forgotten dynamic. Everyone's talking about losing Christian Wilkins. Well, Zach Sealer's still part of this. And then yesterday they had to bring in Calais Campbell, who I know he's late stage Calais Campbell, but my God, at a minimum, does he upgrade kind of the other options that they had to go with Sealer? And of course, Tier Tart is a guy that is going to be relied upon to be that A-gap defender. But
he played 600 out of 712 snaps over top of tackles or outside last year for Atlanta too. So like he can be their edge early against. If they don't, I'd expect they don't have Chubb to start the season. Is kind of where I'm at. Phillips is kind of to be determined. Sounds like there's some pretty promising developments happening there. So you could live in a world where your top 3 edge guys are to start the season, Calais, who can move around, Shaq, and then Chop, with potentially Phillips on a snap count early if he's ready to go.
So Dolphins, number 1.
A lot of positional flexibility there with that group. I think you think about the inverse of that, and that's where you get the next team, which is kind of just the guys that we have are going to play in certain spots. We're going to rotate them a ton, but we're not really going to move them around all that much. And that's the Jets, who have a cornerstone player in Quinnen Williams. They have two cornerstone players because they have Hassan Reddick as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that for us was the big divide where Miami is deep and Miami has cornerstone talent. The Jets not as deep, but the fact that they have 2 cornerstones was what helped push them into this number 2 spot for us along defensive lines in the AFC East.
And the Bills come in at number 3, and what's kind of missing here is a cornerstone player.
Right, that guy.
Yeah, I mean, we have Greg Rousseau, Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, all as quality starters. We have AJ Epinesa as a sufficient level starter. We have good depth player in Austin Johnson and Dwayne Smoot. But this Von Miller guy, he's supposed to be a franchise cornerstone, and he's not. And
I will say this: if we graded Von Miller as a cornerstone, they would be I can confirm the scoring would add up. They'd be the number 1 defensive line in the division.
And that's just not where Von Miller is right now at 35 years old and coming off of an ACL tear. So if Von Miller comes back and is Von Miller and somehow restores that belief, that can change things. But I think the Bills are just missing a dude. They have lots of like above average starters, no question. Who's the dude here? You can't
I'd say they
find
have
it.
a bunch of good starters, not even above average starters. Like they got.
Well, when you say above average and good, those are the same thing to me.
No, I think I think that's the tick between average and good is above average.
All right. Well, yeah.
From semantics.
Yeah. All right.
Standpoint.
And then if Ed Oliver kind of continues with what he showed last year, he's going to be in that cornerstone conversation as well. But
right. That was the guy we went back and forth on Ed Oliver quite a bit. Like, is he a cornerstone? He's getting paid. He had a really good season last year. And I think we kind of settled on go do that again.
Yeah.
And really fortify yourself in that stratosphere. And if you do, we'll put you there. And then we have the Patriots that come in fourth place here. And this is a team that has a really good player in Christian Barmore, but the rest of the interior defensive line depth, we have some big time question marks as far as how comfortable we are with that. Keon White, I know, has some inside flexibility. He could potentially help in that regard, but just a second-year player who's played modest amount of snaps, but not a ton amount of snaps for you. And then on the edge, you got Judon coming back off of an injury from this past season. Josh Uche felt like he regressed in 2023 versus 2022, where he was much more impactful as a player. And the questions about his ability to defend the run, and he's a top 3 edge guy for you. So New England, we just felt they had the most questions with that unit, but they still do have a couple of really good players in Judon and Barmore, and we'll see what Keon White ends up being for them.
We're talking linebackers and defensive backs on the other side of it. It was really tight in both of those situations. We'll break it down for you here in just a moment, so be sure to stick with us.
I do like the Friday shows, but the worst thing about the Friday shows is having to remember I have the extra step for like YouTube production to like bring the tier maker up and down in addition to the reads. So I get a little panicked when you start you started the transition into segment 3 and I didn't take the tier maker down yet, but we're good. We got it all sorted out and we're back.
You're pushing the buttons just fine, Kyle Crabbs, here on a Friday.
I'm doing my best. So we're going to talk linebackers here. And is this the best linebacker division we've done so far?
Feels like it. I mean, everybody's got 2 good starters, right?
Everybody's got 2 good starters
right.
At a minimum.
Right.
So
coming in at number 1, the New York Jets. Outstanding pair of CJ Mosley and Quinnen Williams and what he's kind of become for them. I think those guys were both Pro Bowlers last year, if I'm not mistaken. They fly around, they can play in coverage. They're do everything guys. They're really, really rock solid.
They hit, they tackle, they're fast. Saleh, say what you will about Bob Saleh. He got those guys right on that side of the ball. And he's got great talent to be able to do it. And Mosley, it's been cool to kind of see him refortify himself as an upper echelon linebacker in the league. And obviously Quinnen Williams is the other Williams cat on that defense, who was kind of a surprise day 2 pick when he first came out, didn't make it with Jacksonville, and the Jets have just turned him into an absolute monster.
I forgot he played for Jacksonville until you just said that.
Yeah. He was drafted like top 100, like 3rd round.
Right, because he's like, oh, he's really fast.
Who? They picked who?
Right. Yeah, here he is.
There he is. Jacksonville's had a few of those guys, too. Like, technically, isn't Tyson Alualu in that same bucket?
Yeah.
It's a little different experience, right? Because drafted top 10, but they're like, he picked who? And then he went on to, he just stopped playing, last year. What's it, last year? The year before?
Right. Yeah.
He played more than a decade?
A lot of time with the Steelers, yeah.
Yeah. Second place in the AFC East, we have the Buffalo Bills at linebacker. I will say this about the top 2 teams. They have a cornerstone at linebacker. With CJ Mosley a cornerstone for the Jets, and Matt Milano is a cornerstone for the Bills. And then Buffalo having a really excellent season from Terrell Bernard last year. But kind of the first year doing it, we put him leaning into being a quality starter, but not all the way in that bucket yet. He gets a fraction of quality starter points because it was his first year as a starter this past year. And kind of that was the difference with how the first group and the second group, or the first set and the second set stacked up with the Jets and the Bills was you had Terrell Bernard versus Quincy Williams, who has had several years worth of high-end production as a quality starter.
Let me attack 3 and 4 here in concert. We had the Dolphins at 3. We had the Patriots at 4. And it's going to be pretty easy to understand how we got there. For Miami, you have a quality starter in David Long, a sufficient starter in Jordan Brooks, and the third linebacker being Anthony Walker. He's a quality depth player. For the Patriots, we have Bentley as a sufficient starter, Tavai as a sufficient starter, and Taki as a quality depth player. So your margin is, well, it's all the same except for David Long's a quality starter.
David Long's the best out of those two groups.
Right. That's what it comes down to. Everything else is the same. And I think for those individual schemes, those players make a lot of sense. But I think the point being here with the AFC linebackers, nobody's concerned about their top two. Nobody, right? You feel good about those two players that you have. And so while we have them in a particular order, there's not really a huge gap top to bottom here.
I wanted to do something. Oh, you filtered the other way, you little goof. I want to know where these linebackers stack up. So we've done 20 teams.
Yeah.
20 teams in the NFL we've done so far. And this is why we don't want you screenshotting it. Because if you just did the screenshot of the tier maker, you would miss that the Jets have the second best linebacker room that we have graded out of 20 teams in the NFL. The Bills have the fourth best team linebacker group that we've graded in the NFL. And the Dolphins have the sixth best linebacker group, or they're tied for the sixth best linebacker group that we've graded in the NFL. And then New England is still an above average group. So you have very good representation in the AFC East at the top of all of the teams that we have done thus far, all 20. These groups are all very well represented at the top of that list. And that trend continues in the secondary. Because we did the math on this one ahead of time because we looked at how it stacked up. We said, okay, let's familiarize ourselves with this so we can talk through it. These are all top 10 out of the 20 teams that we have done, all 4 of these teams in the division. So very well represented here as well. The number 1 secondary that we have, Joe, in the AFC East is the Miami Dolphins. And this might be a surprise. You hear they moved on from Xavier Howard. But they have multiple cornerstone players between Javon Holland at safety and Jalen Ramsey. The transition from Howard to Kendall Fuller is a parallel move. You went from what we graded as a quality starter to a quality starter. They just added Marcus Maye this week to be your third safety. They have Jordan Poyer, who's a high floor player, as the other safety. Kader Kohus didn't have his best year last year. He went down as far as how we categorized him from the year prior. But he's a player that has a couple years of experience playing inside and outside. They have a second-year player in Cam Smith, who seems like there's a little bit more buzz and optimism on after he effectively redshirted last year. But the cornerstones was the big difference, along with a high floor across the board and a lot of depth.
Patriots fans, if you're still with us, here's your moment. We have you at number 2 when it comes to the defensive backs. You're the best safety pair in the division, I think pretty comfortably with Jabril Peppers and Kyle.
We don't grade safeties and corners. We grade secondaries.
Right, secondaries. So
I'll say it again in just a minute.
Well, yeah, that's exactly going to be the case with the next 2 teams. But the Peppers and Duggar, it's a top-tier safety tandem in the league. And then we think really highly of Christian Gonzalez. We graded him. I mean, it was a small sample size, but I think not only it's the draft evaluation plus what he showed in a small sample size in the NFL that makes us feel pretty strong about him. Jonathan Jones, just super underrated as that flexible piece that's played inside and outside. No matter where he plays, he's a good answer for them. Marcus Jones is a good young player. They have some nice depth players for them in Shaun Wade and Jalen Hawkins. It's a good-looking secondary for the Patriots.
Yep. We have the Buffalo Bills at 3. And this is made possible because of the development of Christian Benford, right? Rasul Douglas was a really good ad for them at the trade deadline. He's been excellent. But Benford's development as a late round draft pick to kind of cover for the underwhelming nature of Kaiir Elam to this point has really been like a big time save for Buffalo and that secondary. Now there's a lot of transition at safety. Hyde and Poyer no longer here. They have been an identity of that group for a really long time. I know they weren't themselves last year and either played out of position or didn't play. But bringing in Mike Edwards, who we feel is a adequate level starter, and then Teron Johnson is one of the better nickels in the game. I think we said he was top 5, and Bills fans were still mad about it on the Monday show.
I can't believe you're bringing that back. You're doing it on purpose. Now you're doing it on purpose.
I want to give him all the flowers to acknowledge we know how good he is.
Yeah.
We said he was great, and everybody's like, you are too low on Teron Johnson.
They want us to put him in the same bucket as Jalen Ramsey, man. It's that's what it comes down to. All right, so that's the Bills. Really good. I mean, if you just did corners, I think the Bills might have the best group. Is that
no? Because the Jets have Sauce as a corner.
Oh yeah, Sauce and DJ Reed and Michael Carter and all that.
That's a great trio of guys. Now we feel Teron Johnson's a better nickel than Michael Carter.
Mm-hmm.
We think Teron Johnson we think Christian Benford is in the same bucket as DJ Reed. And we feel like Rasul Douglas is a step down from Sauce Gardner. So if you stack the corners, the Jets would have a better cornerback room. And the Jets would probably have a better cornerback room than the Patriots and the Dolphins. But the safety situation and the depth are hard to ignore. And that's why they score where they score. We score 7 guys in the secondary. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And both starting safeties for the Jets. You get Chuck Clark coming back off of an injury. You have Tony Adams, who is kind of thrust into a big-time role. Ashton Davis. You feel pretty good about Isaiah Oliver as your fourth corner.
Yeah.
The Jets are very well.
Flex.
The Jets would be the number 1 team in the division if you just did the corners. But when you put the safeties into the mix and we grade 3 safeties amidst 4 corners, there's not enough there, and it really hurts them. So, Jets, if you're mad about this, go out and sign Justin Simmons or Quandre Diggs, and I'll do the thing. Hold on.
They're going to jump up, Kyle Crabbs. Those would be good additions to the football team.
If they were to sign Justin Simmons, they would have it. The difference is that big. They would be the number 1 secondary in the division.
But it's also how tight it was anyways. Like,
correct, because they're all in the top 10 regardless.
Yeah. So everyone's secondary is really good. Congrats.
Good place to be. I'm going to take that down. So there you have it. There's the AFC East. Having stacked it, Joe, I did think it was interesting to see, like, there's a lot of interchangeability with first and third at almost every stop.
Yeah.
We had the Bills first in 2 spots, the offensive line and quarterback. We had the Dolphins first in skill players, defensive line, and secondary. We had the Jets first in linebackers. But then the Jets are second in skill players, offensive line, and defensive line.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a world if Aaron Rodgers is healthy and stays healthy and plays behind the better offensive line and plays better than what he did in 2022, like, that was a position of debate. So, like, there is a lot of competitiveness as is perceived in the AFC East. So it's interesting to see how it all actually stacked up on the tier maker.
Come down to who can stay healthy. Division games are going to be big.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what I think we should do?
Play them all and see what it is.
Play them all and see what happens.
And that's exactly what we're going to do. We are going to do the NFC North next week.
Can confirm.
We'll start with the Detroit Lions. The NFC runner-ups will be our team on Monday. We look forward to doing that. We hope you come back and see us. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Make it a great rest of your day. We are out of here.